Let's continue with the Wikipedia. Like we can call it a new order of knowledge production platform. Reliability is also valuable for knowledge production as well. Close to 1 billion users use Wikipedia each year. So here there is a dispute between consensus and credentials issue for knowledge production, like the consensus of many, voice of many, or verified sources. So there is an alternative. We can talk about an alternative reliability approach here, where they call it proof is in the pudding. To fully test something, you need to experience it yourself. This is notion that explains this approach in this book. The many versus the few. So voice of the crowd can also contribute to democracy as well. Okay, that's a question to be discussed, of course. When we return to freedom of expression and censorship, the relationship or the conflict between them, it's freedom of expression is an emblematic of or just a core value of democracy. We cannot talk about a high degree of freedom of expression in a society. It means that we cannot have a high level of democracy in that society as well. So they are strictly correlated with each other. And it is freedom of expression is supported by formal specifications and laws. It's already a complicated matter, and the internet made it more complicated as well. If we return to John Stuart Mill's 4 arguments here, it is roughly 150 years old, but still holds for this issue. You can remember this from chapter 2. The censorship is silencing the voice of truth. That's possible. Something is true, but you're silencing it. Or censorship can result in silencing a degree of truth, where we can claim that nothing can be completely true or erroneous. So we will be in the gray area here. And the third one is whole truth. Whole truth can only be tested with the clash of ideas. So by discussion, by the dialectic method. And finally, the fourth one is if an opinion is tested in a free and open discourse, it is more likely to have a vital effect on the character and conduct in a society. So when it is tested like this with the clash of ideas, it will have a more meaningful effect on the individuals of society. They will accept this intuitively. They will accept this in a more efficient way. So that's what John Stuart Mill argues here about against the censorship. Now it requires courage to allow free electronic speech on the internet, because there are also some disputes over it, and restrictions. There are some restrictions on it when other important values are at stake. Here there is a trade-off. This is called the principle of harm in the Stuart Mill's argument, harm principle. Until another person is harmed, yes, you can have freedom of expression, but if people get harmed from this, then you can think about having some measures. And offense principle is another issue here. We should be careful about the offense principle, because if you extend it or abuse it too much, it can bring an end to free speech as well. See that this is a very, very fragile line between what should be censored or not. For example, if a prisoner blogs about murder details, for example, again, this can create offense. This is pretty obvious, but in not so obvious cases, we should be very careful. For example, the censorship on the pornography on the children, for example. These are very clear, but we should be careful about the slippery slope that has been taken. I mean, these people are putting too much things other than these pretty obvious ones into offense claims, and how to draw the line is a critical question. If governments care here, I mean, if they are not able to do nothing or they're avoiding this, private organizations will step up. This can even be more dangerous. Governments should never, I mean, let this idea or let this methods or discussions to private organizations here. There should be some steps should be taken by governments, and it's important. If we go on with the online voting, another part of network societies, in 2000 presidential election, one of the closest in United States history it was a very close one, and where Florida was a pivotal state. Again, it's a pivotal state in this election as well, and without Florida's electoral votes, neither Bush, that time candidate, or neither Al Gore, candidate of Democrats, could get majority of votes in the electoral college in United States election system. 4 heavily democratic counties are recounted in Florida, and the result was, when it has been declared by the Florida Secretary of State, this is the difference you see, this much of votes between Bush and Al Gore. So what a finish that was by, by a very little difference between the candidates, and most of these counties used key punch voting machine in the election. When we talk about improving the reliability of voting systems, look at the problem here that has been discussed. You see, this is the first candidate, the Bush, and this is the second candidate, the Pat Buttigieg, and this is Al Gore. Look at this. When people look at the ballot like this, they can easily confuse that this is the first one and this is the second one, you see, and they just punched here the Democrats, most of them. Then it has been found out that, in fact, this is another party. The design is important here in the voting systems, for example. So online voting is considered in case of such disputes. It's usually, when we think about the benefits, it's nice for people who cannot get the polls and ease of casting your vote from home. The counting can be done pretty quickly. That's nice. And here, there are no physical problems like this, like erasures and middle signs where you, punch your, vote. And it costs less than traditional voting because you do it from your home. That's it. And it eliminates the risk of manipulating of the boxes, but be careful. The databases can be manipulated as well. And multiple choice and ordered elections can be made easier. See, it's pretty easy to apply in this sense. And complicated and long ballots leading to undervoting can be eliminated, just like this one. The ballot problems here can be eliminated as well. And how about the risks? It can result in unfair advantage over people with computers and internet connections at home. Okay, the people who are not familiar or who don't have the technical access to them can be affected negatively here. The system authenticates the user and also records the ballot, but how about privacy? So it means that you vote there will be visible, and vote solicitation and vote selling could be done easier because the people can watch the screens of the voters, and resulting in some pressure for voters as well, because it's not anonymous anymore. And it can be an obvious target for distributed denial service attacks, resulting in crashing networks. And vote tampering, viruses can be a problem if a computer gets infected. What you can do, it means unreliable. And remote access trojans such as Sub7, you remember from this chapter, it can also manipulate your mouse and IO devices. It can vote instead of you, so this would be a catastrophic scenario. And it can be also subject to farming attacks as well, resulting in you lose your identity information, or you leak your identity information yourself. So again, it's another type of risks. When we make a conclusion on the online voting, we can say that existing systems are highly localized, and local corrupts cannot corrupt the entire state for the moment. I mean, what we do is local, and local problems stay at local side usually. And paper record and hard copy for backup is nice. When all else fails, you can rely on hard copies, and we should keep in mind that there will be no hard copies in online voting, and you cannot go back and count them later. It's impossible if a catastrophe occurs. Bruce Shiner notes that a secure internet voting system is theoretically possible, yes, but it would be the first secure network application ever created in computing history. Can we make a similarity between the automated vehicles today and whether they will be used in real life or not, right? It's a dispute again. We have the technology for automatic self-driving cars, for example, but having them installed in a real life with us, driving with us in the traffic, is a question. Yes, you can again, when you make this similarity here, again, secure internet voting is theoretically possible, but if we do it in real, there would be some security problems here, and it would be the first secure networked application theoretically ever created in computing history. So an election system relying on security of personal computers is vulnerable to electoral fraud. We should keep this in mind. Maybe you could use some dedicated computers or dedicated devices for this, but again, that's an open question. Opliger and friends remarked that the anonymity requirements of remote internet voting generally don't allow the use of transaction authentication and monitoring technologies, so this also poses risk. We can conclude that there is a strong case to be made that a government should not allow online voting to be conducted in this way. So, as you see, although theoretically possible or technically possible, there are lots of concerns on the security and reliability of such online voting systems. Keep this in mind. Okay, this was all about this long chapter, and I think I had minimal comments on this issue throughout this session because I'm not a security expert. I have very limited information in this area, I must confess. And all of the articles the presentations I take are from these books and Wikipedia, and I took the images from Google.